All right. Hello, everyone. Nice to have you all. Good to see you, everyone here. So my name is Matthias. I'll be your host for the next hour. Today we have a topic that could be more important right now. It's about how can we as the X industry help make the world a better place. That sounds very big and a bit pathetic, but we have fantastic guests today who are doing just that. More on that in a moment. And I see a lot of new faces here today. Of course, that's mostly because we don't do so many events in English. So before we start, a few sentences about the organizer of this event series. So we are the German UPA, the largest UX community organization in Europe. And as the name suggests, our focus is on the German-speaking region, but we also have some offerings in English. So if you want to know more about that, you can find the link to our English offerings in the chat in a second, and in the overlay as well now, if you're watching this on LinkedIn and YouTube. And regarding this, so if you're watching this on LinkedIn and YouTube, you can also join the Zoom call. You can find the link to the Zoom call in the description, and then you can ask our guests questions directly. And those are already in the Zoom call, we are looking very much forward to your questions. So just use the raise hand feature. You find it under reactions, or I have the English version as well. I don't know what's called in the German version, but long story short, just use the raise hand feature and then you'll be on. But now, directly to our topic and our guest. Hello, Justine. Hello, Juan.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time. So for one of you, it's early in the morning. For the one, you have your lunch break right now. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, that's right.
Can you please introduce yourself and for whom you are working?
Sure. Justine, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, so I'm Justine. I work at IDEOorg in the San Francisco studio and have been here for about almost 3 years now, if not 3. And yeah, have been working here as an interaction designer, now design lead, and have worked on a wide variety of projects and topics, and yeah, excited to share some info about that today.
Nice.
And hello, everybody. My name is Juan Pablo Patino. I am part of the New York office of IDEOorg, but based in Richmond, Virginia. Originally from Miami. I have a pretty long background from advertising, doing traditional media, then going into product design in New York, doing financial tech, health tech, and then before IDEO.org was doing experience design for museums and consultancies and cultural institutions. So I've been with IDEO.org as an interaction design lead here for just shy of a year. In 2 weeks, it'll be a year. And I've also been very fortunate to work with Justine. Thank you. Been very fortunate to work with Justine also on a lot of these projects. And I'm very happy to be here and to represent .org for the first time in a public setting. So thank you.
Nice. Yeah. So not all of the folks know IDEO.org. Yeah, that's shocking, I know. So can you tell us a little bit more, what is IDEO.org and what kind of projects do you do?
Yeah. IDEO.org is a nonprofit design studio that's spun out of IDEO, which is one of the bigger design agencies. And so we work on a lot of social impact work, and that kind of spans the work from healthcare to financial inclusion to early child care and education. There's like a lot of different kinds of topics that we study and research. For me, some of the big projects that I've worked on include everything from like a social impact bank account, working with water.org, where you can save money in this account and then go towards clean water through loans, or an incentive program for women in Bangladesh, where you're trying to help create a digital financial agency for women there by supporting them with a support group and digital tools. And the list goes on. Juan Pablo, did you want to share some of the projects that you've been working on?
Yeah. So to build on what Justine was saying, social impact work, she's talking about financial inclusion, talking about healthcare. We've also started doing some projects around gender equity. And then, we're also very interested in talking more about, the bigger issues. I just recently saw the video you did with Don Norman about climate change. It's also something that we're really interested in as well. Jumping into .org, I got to work on a project that was about sort of celebrating and really promoting the work that IDEOorg has done with very different kinds of organizations like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation around financial inclusion, financial empowerment for women, specifically in last mile communities. Those communities are very, very rural and outside of cities and poor and developing nations. And then for the past year, I've been doing a lot of work with the CDC around vaccine awareness, sort of trying to increase vaccine acceptance, especially for refugee, immigrant, and migrant communities. And that's been really great work as well. One other side project I did during this time was with the state of New Jersey, the Department of Child Welfare and Families, trying to redesign that system in order to better serve the communities that they're trying to affect. So also getting a little bit more in-depth work with the governments that are part of these kinds of efforts, not just private institutions or nonprofits themselves.
That sounds very exciting. So how do you decide, you yourself and you as IDEO.org, on which projects you work on and which don't?
So I'll start this off, Justine. So since I'm newer to IDEO.org, it's pretty fresh in my mind. During the process of, my onboarding process, I had a really great business lead, who's my supervisor. And they, asked me very direct questions, or what is important to you? How do you want to make a difference? And what realms do you want to work into? And early on, I do have a background in healthcare, doing, healthcare apps for different kinds of insurance companies in the United States. So that was something that was interesting to me. Also, being an immigrant myself, I'm interested in helping other immigrant communities. So that's where it led me into CDC work. And then also having an access and having, familiarity with the financial sector is what led me to starting with some of that work with Change Plus. So, it's a very straightforward conversation. People are very open with each other about what they want to do, how they wanted to impact the projects that they work on. And then, of course, there's this, nice marrying between what you want to do and what's available to you right now. We have a pretty open system of being able to share with each other what projects are coming down the pipeline. And so you have a sense of what's coming in the future, up to 6 months from now. And whether or not those things actually do come to fruition, of course, things get pushed back, things get delayed. You try your best to work with the people around you to, and whether or not say what you want to work on. And yeah, that's it for now. Justine, what do you think?
That's like one of my favorite things about working at IDEO.org that Juan Pablo mentioned, is that people are really interested in what you're interested in, and I'll try to staff you on those projects. Along with that, I think the partnerships team also really looks out for good partners, in terms of like partners that will want to take the work forward and be good thought partners and in doing co-design with us. So it's not just us working with a client, but we're really partnering in the work together. And I could see this in lots of other past projects where I worked with Alight, which is this organization that was helping Ukrainians fleeing the country and arriving in Poland to connect with staff and volunteers with their org to find free and affordable housing. As well as like another project in the past where we were creating and running services in Dallas to help teens access birth control. And through those different projects, we've kind of been collaborating very closely with them, and it becomes a very like symbiotic process in a relationship. And those are the projects that become very fruitful and rewarding.
Nice. And obviously the projects are very different, but how's the work different in comparison to a normal design agency?
So for me, just, also just coming in, there is a real emphasis on having a more flat hierarchy, which is an oxymoron to say. And everybody at IDEOorg, I really do believe has a very tremendous and valuable skill set. Everybody has crafts that they are really great at, and areas of growth that they want to really see through. I've been able to have really frank and honest conversations with the leadership, from the very executive levels all the way down to the interns, and we all really treat each other very equally. The methods of feedback are there, they're transparent, and I think that we're always actively trying to improve them. I myself was part of the very recent DEI committee, a DE&I committee, and Justine was as well. And we were able to give our feedback as to how we want to see the organization, grow and change with the times, and not be, looking at it as a reaction, but also trying to be proactive and trying to affect positive change. How is that different from other organizations? Well, there was a lot of siloing. There was a lot of in the past, you did have access to people. However, there was just a sense, there was just a feeling that they weren't as accessible to your peers, right? If you want to talk to somebody above you, you have to go through certain channels. And I really don't feel like it's necessary here. I can literally just Slack, my CEO. I can Slack anybody that I want to talk to, and everybody can, would be happy to talk to me about whatever it is it's on my mind.
Yeah, those are all really big ones that come to mind for me as well, like the feedback and transparency. There's lots of processes put in place where feedback is given often to each other throughout the project. In the projects, we have guides, so people who are design directors often, and they'll kind of come in and advise us, and they'll help us sort of think through the project and anything that's on our mind. We have really great business leads where they're really invested and focused on their growth. So we're kind of thinking about each person, what they're interested in growing in, and how can we sort of facilitate that growth through the projects and through the community. The community as well is one of the biggest parts of IDEO.org's culture. I think they do a fantastic job here, unlike anywhere else, where it's really focused on based on the studio, based on your craft, really allowing people to connect and build the culture, and having this sort of playful, makery vibe that goes on in the studio. Yeah, I think that's a really important part, having some sort of play introduced in the work and in the process, and not just in the output. For example, we'll do these creative warm-ups during projects, and they'll just be a way to loosen up, get the creative juices flowing, and start be silly before getting into maybe some more serious work.
Are you sharing the office with IDEO? Is it the same team, or are you completely separated?
The San Francisco and New York studios are shared.
See.
Mm-hmm.
Do you work in both agencies basically, or do you have to decide?
So what I've seen is that IDEO.com, we'll just say for that name, they do have these things called fellowships, where they do bring in designers and other kinds of staff to join for part of .org projects. And it's really interesting. I don't see a real big difference in the way that we interact with each other. We all share Slack channels. We have our own proprietary, but we can talk to people from other organizations. The New York studio also shares an office space with many other companies that are all part of like the same collective. And so that really also helps, broaden the way that we think about things and see the work around us. So I would say, like, for me, I feel like we're kind of like, we're a little bit more like silly, a little bit more fun, to be quite honest. The other folks in the New York, I speak for the New York studio because I go there more often. There is a little bit of a difference there. Like the people in New York do feel a little bit more looser, laid back. We know we're doing, serious design work, but we don't look like it, right? Which is a lot of fun. And I did get a chance to go see the San Francisco studio for myself, but I'll let Justine talk about that if she wants.
Yeah, the San Francisco studio. So before IDEO and IDEO.org were in separate but very close proximity. And so now they're all under one roof in one building. And that's a new building that opened up during the pandemic. It's a beautiful space, and they've got like the cafeteria, lunch area. They have the production space where it's like a wood shop, metal shop, printers, plotters, 3D printers, all of that. Lots of different like working spaces for people to gather in a collaborative way or more solo time. And I think the shared space really helps facilitate and foster the community. They are separate entities, but having that way of like cross collaboration, pollination of people, I think has been really great in sort of growing the community.
Nice. And how are the projects different? I know IDEO is very strong in design thinking. So do you use the same methods and the same processes, or how is the project different?
Yeah, I think a lot of the processes are very similar. I think we have similar rituals where for projects we'll start with pre-flights, we'll have mid-flights and post-flights. And so what those are sort of like these check-ins for the project team to have with themselves. For example, for pre-flight, it's kind of just getting to know your teammates and understanding how you like to work. How will you work together for the rest of the projects? What kind of skills do you want to practice and grow in? And how could that be applied to this project?
Yeah, to build on that, I would say that the processes that we use are the same. And in some cases, the buildings and the staff are the same. For me, the biggest difference is that we are at .org are focused on social impact work and designing for a more equitable world. That doesn't mean that IDEO.com is not doing that. I think that they also just have that added feature of like, focusing on products per se. So I think it's just that we're more focused in the kind of work that we're doing. But I think that everybody shares in those kinds of opportunities when the time is right.
Yeah, and I think IDEO also focuses a little bit more on some of the like future of speculative kind of work. And we will too, but more with like the social impact lens.
Could you walk us through a project? So what's the first thing? How do you start it? And what are the next steps? How do you pick your methods?
That's a good one.
Or does it vary so much between the projects?
It does vary. So I'm leading my first project right now, and Justine is part of that. And during that time, there was during the time where I'm kind of preparing to start the project, there is a lot of there are a lot of resources that I have access to, whether it's on the website that's coming from IDEO.com or coming from my peers or my business lead. They they have a lot of methods that we can use, a lot of activities that we can plan out, and also a lot of, I would say, a lot of time is spent working with your program guides who are sort of like looking at the overall larger projects that are all under these same big umbrellas, in order to plan things out.
You just muted yourself.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened.
And you're back.
Okay, so yeah, you have time to scope the project. So giving a sense for how long certain phases of work are going to take, and then from there you start looking into the details of each of those phases of work, making sure that you have time to conduct a good amount of research, conducting interviews with your stakeholders. For example, getting a chance to go out on the field and doing that kind of research as well. And then getting together with your team to do downloads, or just take all that research and try to gather insights and then synthesize or come up with ideas for how we can have the right kind of design interventions there. Anything you want to add to that, Justine?
Yeah, that's a pretty good overview of like the general process. And it definitely varies from project to project. Sometimes you'll be on a project that lasts for 2 weeks versus maybe like 4 months long. So the phases of the project kind of like expand or contract based on the timing. Just kind of picking up on the note about play from what I was talking about previously, is sometimes we'll do like these inspiration trips or analogous inspo. I think that's like a big part that I enjoy too, where you're sort of pulling in and trying to like think about analogous examples of how you could see like maybe a service being done like a different way. And so if we're doing like on the ground work, sometimes we get to do that in person together, and that'll be a really fun moment to sort of do some team building time.
I see. And we got a question from Lawrence. I'll get to this in a sec. Just a quick reminder to everyone who's watching us on LinkedIn and or YouTube. You can join the Zoom call and ask a question as well. Just follow the link in the description. And we got another question as well. So questions are coming in. So Lawrence is asking, how do you integrate the feedback from the customers? What's your preference? And I want to add on this. Do you call them customers?
I think generally we call them, so before they used to be called clients, used to be called customers. There's different ways of thinking about it, but I think that I generally like to just say people, because it's really a little bit more all-encompassing, and people can be classified into different categories based on the use case, right? So we had very recently a project where we're trying to design a toolkit for event gatherings. And so we had to get feedback from our co-designers, who would essentially be the staff that are participating in these events, but then also try and reach out to the community. So we call them the community members, or the clients for us, because those are the people we're trying to serve. And then get their feedback. For integrating the feedback, we have these things called download sessions. And pre-pandemic days, those would be days where we take down notes and put them onto Post-its and put them on a wall and try and sort of like arrange them by theme and group. Nowadays, in my experience, we've been doing that mostly on Figma and on our mural. And that's been a really great way to sort of like see where similarities, where patterns emerge. And for me, I actually do have a preference of using Figma. I really have been using the tool heavily since joining IDEOorg. And I really enjoy it as a way of getting work done. So that's my preference with that.
Yeah, I would say the same as well. Preference to having those downloads in Figma. I kind of like think about equating it to detectives or investigators when they have everything posted on a giant wall.
Oh yeah.
Bring the red string and all the different points. That's
Mm-hmm.
what it feels like, but in like the digital world. And yeah, we'll often call our clients or use the terminology partners too. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, really thinking about them as thought partners that are involved in the entire process, especially if it's done through co-design sessions where we're meeting with them on a regular basis. And so we'll be integrating feedback sort of at that level in a week-to-week sort of thing, or it might be on a larger download scale where we're doing like these longer term interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm muted. And we got another question from Ayara.
Okay.
Shoot.
Yeah. Hi, I should be on now. Yeah. Thanks for coming and joining and sharing all your expertise with us here. My question would also be, how does the budgeting and financing work? Because you're doing mostly social impact. Is IDEO.com the main financing agency for IDEO.org, or do you have different pots? Because that's mostly how do you finance social impact or planet-centered impact work?
Mm-hmm. From what I've seen working at .org, you have the program partners, right, which are the big foundations like Bill and Melinda Gates, the CDC, which is a public financing sort of partner, Robert Wood Johnson, and so on and so forth. They sort of provide the funds for the large program at large. So, for example, if it's about financial inclusion or financial empowerment, that is like the main program. Then that money gets split up into different kinds of efforts, and those are determined by our program team and our partnerships team, and then those go down into the smaller projects, which then Justine and I might work on. And what do you think, Justine? Is that kind of accurate? We're both designers. This is new territory for me to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the time I see it's like funded by the larger foundation or funding partner, and that kind of getting trickled down to the smaller organizations. Like I've worked with an organization or foundation in Detroit that's focused on social and human healthcare for families. And they had this sort of program where they were working a bunch of smaller organizations, and through them we'd be meeting with them weekly on a co-design basis.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm hearing is your projects, the kind of projects varies a lot as well. So you talked about campaigns, you talked about some digital projects working in Figma. Then I heard, I think some physical products you're working on. So that's correct, right? I'm seeing nodding.
Yeah. It's funny that you said that. Just to let you know, so I started working with .org in August, and I've been working a lot with the CDC, right? So there's a CDC program, and through that we've started working on vaccination efforts. And in the list of programs, it started with like vaccine awareness campaigns, right? Getting people to know that there's a vaccine out when it first came out. Then vaccine acceptance campaigns where we try to promote the benefits of the vaccine. And then after that came, the idea of holding events to talk about the vaccine. So getting the community involved into these events. Then focusing on different sectors of the communities that we're serving. So focusing on adults, focusing on teenagers, focusing on preteens and younger children, which led us to actually talk to mothers, because those were the sort of like the people that were actually in charge of the health and safety of the families. And then now with the current project, we're working on how do we then organize different organizations, community-based organizations, public health departments, to then design spaces so that way they can talk about all this great stuff. So there's a lot of building upon each other. It's not like these different projects are just sort of like living in silos. We're learning from each other. We're trying to share as much as we can. And I think that overall helps build better products and services.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting part about working at IDEO.org, where working as an interaction designer here doesn't mean you're just working wireframes and screens. It's quite opposite. As you can see examples, where it's like creating a toolkit or creating, I guess it could be creating a website, but it could also be like a program or more of like a service oriented thing where you're working with people, organizing how they gather, kind of co-designing with people so that they can people with other people learn how to be in community and collaborative with other communities.
And please go ahead.
No, I was gonna just say that that's what Justine just said about co-design. To me, has been one of the biggest lessons of joining .org, and that us as designers, we have skill sets. We have our craft that we love to use almost on a daily basis, but working on projects, we really try to put the people that we're serving at the center of not only the outcomes, but the center of the ideation and the solutions that we come up with, because they are really the people that we need to use these services moving forward. So I've really learned a lot about co-design, and that also, as a designer, also means learning how to let go of certain things. Specifically, those of us that come from very fancy high ivory towers and institutions that teach us what good design is supposed to be. And looking forward, you have to be able to change your mindset, change your point of view in order to really come up with an idea that everybody loves and everybody wants to use.
Yeah, I'll put a pin in that, and we come back to this. Just one more question regarding the different kind of projects or products. So you need a partner to realize them. So what are the chances that something gets built? So with a digital product, it's mostly a little bit easier in comparison to an actual 3D physical product. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, that's something we're sort of going through right now. And yeah, I think that's the whole part about building the relationship with the partner and seeing how we can empower them to take on the project, because they are going to be the ones who implement everything in the end. So really understanding their challenges, what they face in the day-to-day, what do they need to kind of take the project forward, and how can we design for that?
Yeah, there has to be a lot of communication between your partners, yourselves and your teams, and the co-designers that we work with. When we get into situations where we feel like there's going to be a little bit of a pushback, we have to know who we can speak to first in order to start getting buy-in from other players, from other people within the project. And I think that what it does is it helps prepare people for what's to come, rather than hitting people with a surprise and hoping that it all works out. There are so many moving parts to the projects that we work on that you have to over communicate with folks in order to make sure that at least your MVP is something that'll live on past the end of the project date.
I see. Yeah. What kind of tools do you use? So you already mentioned Figma. That's potentially just for the digital projects or digital products. So what do you do in the research phase? You mentioned that some of the projects are in different countries. So you're traveling there with a team and then do in-person research? Do you do remote research, or how do you manage that?
Yeah. Yeah, we did mention Figma as a big one. It's not just for digital prototyping as well. I found is that I feel like we really push Figma to the limits.
Okay, so what does it mean?
So with that, for some projects, we'll have we use it as like a whiteboarding tool, essentially like a mural or Miro, which sometimes that will come up. It depends on the project teams and people, like what do they want to use or what do they like using. But we'll create post-it notes in Figma and sort of do like the clustering and fitting and mapping there. As we were saying, if we take those notes from like research, if we're doing on the ground research, then I think it's usually just like pen and paper or like Google Docs. In the past, I've also used Descript, which is another user like interviewing testing tool, which was really fun to use since you can kind of like edit and move around clips of like people that you've interviewed, put them together into some sort of like interview like overview. What else do we use?
So that's mostly for remote user research then. Descript, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I started pretty much in the middle of remote worlds, like before hybrid started becoming a thing. And for me, yes, making Figma prototypes in order to show ideas for a website, or even creating a Figma prototype to show an idea for a chatbot that hopefully a developer will create was something that we used. I used a lot of After Effects also to show how introduction experiences can live on or exist to send off to developers. When it came to research, I would say a lot of Zoom calls on Figma. Also, using Google Docs was a really valuable tool because it is pretty much the lowest entry point for many people that use technology. So I made some interactive like choose your own adventure games in Google Docs that resembled the chatbot when we realized we didn't have a developer to make the original chatbot. So there's that. And then I think also creating, I did create a lot of videos and for the sort of like final pieces, especially for the New Jersey work, we had come up with the idea of like doing like a hotline and like, what would that look like if people needed help or people needed assistance? And so writing out scripts, getting your teammates and other people within the company to help record those scripts, and then, having the initial test prototype in Figma, but then also, doing the final editing and final animations and After Effects were really good. Recently, we've also done research because we're doing a space design project. And so that's when we actually got to go in person. And so I got to use Canvas, which is an iPhone app that lets us use a LiDAR scanner in order to record what the space looks like. That became useful for us later on when we had to talk about, different areas that we were redesigning for and saying, what was this looking like again? Oh yeah, we can go into the Canvas and sort of like actually take a look at what that was. Not to mention also, I'm really excited, and I've told this already to the team a million times, that would love to finish up by using 3JS and Webflow together to help sort of tell that story of how the space is going to live on. And so those are some of the kind of tools that we've been using. I think it's just really, really great that we've been able to do so many different kinds of tools and not necessarily be stuck in one thing. And at the same time, both of us being interaction designers, we are also trying to push more for, using those cool tools as well. I won't forget to mention that we had like this big, like global kind of meetup where all the different studios got together, and we got to decide how did we want to do like this big conference when nobody's together, everybody's separate. So we use this one interactive service called GatherTown, where everybody got to look like little 8-bit RPG characters. And so we set up rooms and set up conference rooms and gathering spaces all digitally there. And so that was a lot of fun. And I think Justine saw that to the end. I was only there to help decide on which technology we were using.
Yeah, and I think one of the big takeaways of that tools is that at IDEOorg, we are open to using many and all tools. And if you're interested in a tool in particular, you can try to figure out how to work that into a project if it's possible. Juan Pablo and I were also looking at spline design for using 3D.
Oh, yeah.
For the model that we might bring into Webflow. yeah, we've also used Webflow and ReadyMag for different kinds of websites. Definitely into or big on experimentation for like those more fun new tools, because there's always so many new ones coming out all the time. And then at the same time, I think Google Slides is also like a huge one too. It's one that's super accessible for our partners, and we'll often do our co-design sessions in there. So we'll create a deck and with a bunch of activities within there, and then people can easily come in and like move stuff around, write things, add things.
Yeah, I think we do most of our presentations when we're sharing decks and, you know, going through a deck. We're not actually in presentation mode. We're kind of just in like the working mode, because people are going to come in and they're going to add things, they're going to move things around. And when we see people moving around things and see people being active in the decks, it is actually very fulfilling to know that this activity is actually working out and we're actually getting some great feedback from it, because it does really help later on when we say, what happened here? Well, let's go take a look at the deck. It's a mess, but it looks great.
I see. Nice. And coming back to the users, so I've seen on your website that you have a couple of projects that are in different countries and very different cultures and very different environments where you don't have power at all times. So how do you deal with all these challenges, walking the shoes of these users, not knowing basically how life really is there?
Yeah, I think it's really
tough one.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
Really talking to them, getting to know them. In the like research phase, we'll create discussion guides, try to do our own little brainstorm of like, what are all the questions we could possibly ask to understand and know what it might be like to live a life in their shoes. And I think this was a challenge that when you are in person, you see so many things that happen that you wouldn't be told by them talking about it. And so like seeing the things in person kind of helps fill in the blanks of the whole scene or story.
Yeah, I think that one of the important things that is part of the process at IDEOorg and IDEO, human-centered design, is really trying to find a lot of ways to put yourself into the shoes, whether it's being immersed in the environments that they're in, and if you physically can't, how can you find something that's as close to that? We try our best to do that, and I think that especially when it comes to working with developing nations, you can't substitute being there in person. But what Justine just said does resonate, is like you need to be able to at least have one person over there who is going to be your sort of like liaison and be the person that you can speak to almost daily and just get their kind of like point of view on things, because that person is really going to be that those are the shoes that you're trying to fill right there. I think that especially with the first remote project that we did, which was for these refugees and immigrants of the Somali, Ethiopian, and East African communities in Minnesota, we had some really great co-designers there who are not just co-designers, they're not just people in the communities, but they're people that connected to the communities. The people know them within the communities, and that helps us not just get one point of view, but get a point of view that understands many other people's point of views. When they're talking about, who are the people, who are the sources of information that people go to, if they're that connected, we tend to give that a little bit more weight. We understand that they're not just speaking from personal experience, but they're also like, asking others around them. So I think that those relationships are really, really important, especially as we're still kind of getting back into a more, in-person world.
Yeah, the partnering is a big aspect of it, where you'll have our partner, and there will be people that we meet with on a regular basis. And in a way, one of them or a few of them might become have a design lead role in a sense, where they're taking on large parts of the design with us and really helping us understand their side of the story and like what's going on over there. This is like really important too, especially during prototyping. If we're prototyping remotely, we'll need to sort of have a really good setup and good downloads from the partner as well, so that we can understand.
So that means you're working with, please go ahead.
No, yeah, we had a prototyping session with that same co-design group, and we were designing for a health meetup, and our prototype was that first health meetup, and so we were all, of course, very nervous about how is this going to work out if none of us are actually going to be physically there. This was in the middle of the Omicron wave in the US in December, and so there was just a lot of communication and a lot of meetings with our co-designers. And with those of the co-designers that were a little bit uncomfortable or didn't have much experience facilitating conversations or leading groups, making sure that they had ample time to rehearse, to practice, and to ask all the questions that they needed in order for them to be able to do it on their own. And they did a great job.
Yeah, and that means you're working with volunteers as well. And I guess a couple in our audience would ask, how can I become a volunteer?
Yeah, so we have a lot of the volunteers that we source aren't necessarily volunteers. They are paid for their time. We respect that they are giving their time and their efforts to things. And so during the beginning of the process, and I think probably even before the project begins, we make sure that the groups that we're working with, if we need co-designers, if we need people on the ground, that they are compensated for their time according to the level of effort that they'll be putting in.
And in general, what are the biggest challenges right now in all these projects for you?
Oh, the biggest challenge. I will say right now, the biggest challenge is, for me, as an interaction designer, as a person that loves using technology, is getting the time to do the R&D. There's a lot of opportunity for good design, for good technology to be used in the right ways. However, some of these projects, they need to be able to have enough time to test these things out. Without that, we're kind of pushed to work a little bit quicker, and that makes us rely on tools that are tried and true. And sometimes we don't get as much experimentation as we'd like to. We do get a lot of experimentation. I would say definitely in my 16 years of experience, we get the most here. But I would say like that's still like a little bit lacking for me as an interaction designer, like being able to experiment a little bit more with technology, get that prototyping, get that research phase, like just fattened up a little bit, so that way we can try and fail, and we're not wasting so much time. We still have some buffer there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Pushing on craft can be difficult sometimes during a project, especially if it's time constrained. Because obviously doing that R&D work for each tool or like a new process, there's some sort of like learning curve there. And so especially when there's a project with a lot of co-design, there's sort of this balance that you have to play where you're balancing helping facilitate the co-design sessions and then also doing like the actual design process that you and the project team will be doing on. So that's something that will be, you're kind of have to find out like what's a good balance or cadence to go between those two. And it definitely helps to have project team members where we're kind of splitting or dividing the work amongst ourselves and have our own like work streams.
I see.
Yeah.
Interesting. And what do you think, what kind of projects you would love to work on that you hadn't had the chance yet, or what are the topics you think we as a community should work on?
Mm. Justine, you can go first.
If you need a moment to think about
I
it.
need a second to
Yeah.
think about that one.
Yeah. I think a big topic that's kind of coming up more is climate change or climate action projects. And we haven't worked too much on that at .org yet, but I think it is something that we want to focus on more. Especially kind of going off of what Don Norman was saying about humanity-centered design. Space 10 has also talked about this too. We're designing more for the planet and not just humans. So we've done the human-centered design approach, and now let's sit more holistically on like the planet level. I personally would in doing more of those kinds of projects.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's a big push towards a little bit more climate change work at .org. I know that I said that as one of my focuses coming in. I think for thinking about, UX, interaction design, UX, experience design, I've kind of like had a little bit of all those titles. It really is about putting humanity first, and thinking about, all peoples. I would say, working on climate change. I think also, being able to work to really try and, address the concerns that are coming up from a lot of reactionist kinds of movements. We've made a lot of progress within the last 50 years, 60 years, and it's all started to, especially United States, started to like roll back because of a lot of reactionism, and that is extremely dangerous. So I would say like trying to address the root causes of the concerns, I think is something really important. How UX can do that, of course, is going to depend on the scenario. And to really add to that, it's really more about like, how do you address these really big problems on a local scale? The local scale is where all these sort of like really like regressive reactionist movements have started, and so we have to go back there and focus on the communities that are being affected by them, and try to bring some positivity to them, bring the humanity back into those, because we're not going to do it from the top down. It has to be from the bottom up.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Thanks. And we'll wrap up soon. So if anyone has any questions, please raise your hands or put it in the chat. My final question is not just for you, it's also for the audience. So what are your recommendations for those who want to use their design skills and do something good? So is it apply to IDEOorg, or what do you think every one of us can do? And please, audience as well, if you have any suggestions.
So I will just reiterate and just say, starting locally would be very, very important. And I would also say, if your skill set says that you need to go to an organization and help out, do that. We're all UX designers, I'm hoping here. So that would probably just mean starting there. And just remember that, everybody, even if you disagree with them, you can still learn something from them.
Yeah, what comes to mind is like starting with the community, sort of what you're saying, Juan Pablo, about starting locally, gathering people together to sort of like understand the common ground and what are the different skills and things people want to bring or are excited to bring to the table, and how could those different skills or crafts be brought together. Thinking about like the longer impact that you might want to create, and how can you sort of like work backwards to get to this like future vision of whatever that might be. And other like community work too that can be done with like checking your biases and understanding how you can sort of work that into your design process, I think is also something that's really important.
Thank you. And we got one more question from Aya.
Yeah. For me, no, it's more like what we can do as UX designers. For me, it's also important, like the community aspect where you live. You start either gathering people, but also your own practice. What Justine already said, you always check your own practice. What are you doing? What can you give to the work, to the project? And also when you feel it's going not, right or wrong, a different way, then you can just stand up and voice your concerns. I think that's one of the main things. Also, when you work in a normal setup or in the marketplace setup, always don't shy away from raise your voice and share your concerns or your considerations, because I think this is part of our job, is to raise all the important points, even if they're uncomfortable. So that's more.
As usual. Money. Yeah, any comment on that? Otherwise, I'll get two more questions.
I was just looking at the questions in the chat.
Yep. Yeah, we got two more questions then. So one in the chat, I'm currently working on a senior in college studying marketing and entrepreneurship. I'm wondering if you guys have any advice to get into the UX UI design world without having a design degree. That's also a tough one.
That is a tough one. Gatekeeping is a real thing. I think that if you don't have a degree, but you're still interested in the field, coming to conferences like this or meetings like this for the community, I think is very valuable. And as you're doing right now, putting yourself out there and be ready to, not get what you're hoping for right away. I think that persistence and tenacity is very important, especially in creative fields, because there's a lot of people with creative energy, and it is a challenging one, although rewarding as it is.
Yeah, I think if you don't have a design degree, you can still build a portfolio, creating your own projects that really showcase what you're passionate about and what skills you have. Whatever you're passionate about and whatever you can share about that through good storytelling, people will get excited about it and that will stand out.
Good call. And Ayara, you have also a comment on that?
Yeah, it's always good because I'm also mentoring people who want to come into the industry. So I'm mostly mentoring young designers, and then that's also look for a mentor and go to conferences and go to meetups and build up your community and the network and then share. And also a good way is give a little talk in a meetup. There are so many meetups now online and around the world. So they're always looking for talks. I'm organizing ladies at UX Bristol, so I'm always looking for women to come and give a talk. So there are many opportunities where you can share what you gathered so far, and where you can ask for support and develop. You need to grow and develop.
Oh yeah,
a very good point.
I was just thinking the talk reminded me of having writing out there. That could be in a blog or Medium articles are really big, I feel like, in the design community, but that just lets people into your process and kind of walks them through that. That's really helpful too.
Yeah, we will end the live stream in a bit. I'll keep the Zoom call open here, so in case you want to network and we make some matches here between potential speakers. We got one more question. It's a good one to close this. Do you have any spaces for remote interns at IDEOorg?
I think that is dependent on geographic region. because we do have San Francisco, West Coast, New York, East Coast, and then Nairobi, which is in Kenya. I think that there's a lot of space for that. So that's all I know for now.
Yeah, I know in the San Francisco studio, there are interns there right now in person. In the San Francisco, well, in all studios, I think we all kind of have like a hybrid role. So some of us are remote sometimes, and we'll go in like some days of the week.
Yeah, I think we have a New York resident in the night that's doing a remote internship in the Nairobi studio right now. So I think there's a possibility. Yeah, if you're interested, just definitely reach out.
That sounds good. Any final thoughts? Otherwise, we'll end the meeting for today.
Final thoughts. You know, I love the idea of giving designers more agency and making us much more than just middle people in the process. We do have way more to offer to the communities. So I'll say that. And I'll also say shout out to IDEOorg in New York and Nairobi, in San Francisco. Shout out to Gallagher. Shout out to Infusion. Shout out to Almo DDB. All the great people I met in the past. And if I met you in Germany, which I don't know if too much of you, but if I met you, hello, and I'll see you all later. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this was a really lovely organized chat. Feel free to reach out if you have any more questions. Yeah, happy to connect otherwise.
Yeah, perfect words to end the meeting. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks so much for sacrificing your lunch break or morning. So thank you very, very much. Great insights. Again, I'll keep the Zoom meeting open. We will end the live stream now. So thanks everyone who watched us live. Have a great day, evening, or morning, whatever, wherever you are. Until next time.
Bye, guys. Gotta jump.
Hi, everyone.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good evening.